Well, my dad was born in 1900, and he was born in a fairly wealthy family. His dad was a pharmacist, and he was also the local doctor in Venice, where they lived, because the pharmacists were all the only doctors they had. He had three brothers, I believe, and he came to this country. He snuck into Canada, and from Canada he came to the United States. The reason he came to Canada was World War I. Two of his brothers were killed in the war. So his father wanted to send him and his sisters away. So they went to Canada. They stuck into Canada somehow. I don't know how they got there. And from Canada, they came over to here. Now, a few of his sisters live in Sault Ste. Marie. And too bad my sister's not around, because she really knew. She used to visit them and everything. But I was there once. What I thought was cool there was they had like a water fountain, and they also had a pop fountain. And so in the kitchen, they turned it on, or I don't know how they did it, but instead of drinking water, I drink pop. The reason they came over here was his dad wanted to get them out of Europe, because he knew war was coming and everything. And of course, after he lost his two sons, my dad was the youngest of them. I think my dad had three brothers, but I don't know what happened to the third one. But anyway, he came across here, and then he took a job at Ford. Once he snuck into the United States, he got a job at Ford Motor Company, working. I don't know what he did there, but that's where he met my mom. My mom had a rougher life. Both of her parents died young, so her, my Aunt Marie, and my Aunt Connie, and Paulie, and Mike all were in the orphanage. And my mom got out of the orphanage to work at Ford Motor Company. It was where they'd come in, and a lunch wagon is what it was. And that's where my dad met my mom. He would give her a nickel tip every time he bought a meal. And she thought that was cool. And I think she kind of fell in love with him that way. But anyway, he used to always talk about it only cost him a nickel. But so anyway, my mom got out of the orphanage, and slowly but surely they brought Marie, and Paulie was lucky. Chris, I don't know what their last name was, adopted Paulie. So they were like godparents for my mom and all the others. However, they couldn't get him out of the orphanage. They only could afford to take Paulie out. So anyway, my mom started dating my dad when she was 13 years old, working on the lunch wagon. And my dad was 10 years older than her. So he was born in 1900, and she was born in 1910. They were both good dancers. That's another thing why they got married, I think. They loved dancing. But he always thought he was like Valentino or something. And they called him the Sheik. And they used to go out dancing a lot when there were happier times. I don't remember much, or I don't even know much about what he did in Italy, because he came over fairly young. But he and his sisters used to dance too a lot. But my mom was a very good dancer, and he thought my mom was the best dancer of a bunch. So they used to go out and dance, and they'd win a lot of dance contests. They had a house on Olivet Street, and things were going good. And my first sister, Dolores, she was about 5 years old. The street they lived on, at the corner, was a grocery store. So my mom would send my sister down to the grocery store to get some things every so often. She never had to cross a street or anything, but my sister was, I don't know, maybe in the first grade or something, and she was going to the store for my mom, and her teacher was going by, and they waved or something. I don't know what happened, but anyway, the teacher lost control of the car, came over the curb and hit my sister and killed her. So the earliest thing I can remember, I must have been less than a year old, because I remember everybody crying in the house, and my sister's casket was in the house. I remember my mom holding me, and I was looking down at my sister in the casket, and I can still picture her today. That was kind of sad. We moved around a lot, different houses, and eventually I went to my early years in school were in the same school that my sister went to, which was Higgins School. So my dad, after they got divorced, he bought himself a truck, and he was hauling stuff around, and finally he decided he was going to leave, and he went to LA. So that was one thing I remember about my parents, though. My dad was a stickler for cleanliness, and my sister and I, every weekend, we had to scrub the house down. While they were both working, we were scrubbing the house down, and we had to wax the kitchen floor and the dining room floor. They both had linoleum in them, and we used to wax it every weekend. We had to do that doggone thing, and I hated that. My sister did too, but my dad was a stickler on that. When we were cleaning the floors a lot, she hit me over the head with an ashtray a couple different times, cut my head open. We'd fight, and I didn't like cleaning the floor anyway, and we both had to do it. We didn't like, my dad wouldn't let it go. But anyway, a couple times I remember she hit me over the head with this ashtray and cut my head open. And I don't know what she told my mom or dad, but anyway, I had to have stitches in my head. So, but my sister used to have some parties over the house when nobody was around. When my dad was already gone by this time, and she'd have her girlfriends and the boyfriends coming over. And this one time, the boyfriends used to tell me, "Get the hell out of my room," and that. So I got mad at them, and there was a big plate of potato salad, and they were off the porch, and I took the potato salad and dropped it on their head. And then I took off, and they couldn't find me. I didn't come home for a long time. But anyway, they never beat me up, but I thought they were going to. This one guy, but yeah, he had potato salad all over himself. When they got a divorce, my mom got a job at Wolverine Tube, and she worked there almost all her life. And in fact, Joe's got that certificate during World War II when she worked on the atomic bomb. They did something over there making tubes or something, and if you go to Joe's house, you'll find a certificate from the government with a picture of my mom and me down in the corner. But we weren't on the certificate, but they gave it to my mom in recognition of what she did during the war. I don't remember very much more. My dad went to California, and I didn't see him again until I joined the Navy back in 1952. About a week after I joined the Navy, my mom sent me a notice that I was drafted for the Korean War. And but I was already in the service, so I put 4 years in the service. My buddy Ken Terry, I saw him before I left I came back and he was out of the service already. He put in his 2 years and I didn't even know he was in. But anyway, as far as the service goes, I went to the Philippines. I was there for about 26 months, I guess. And during that time, I became a seaman, then a third-class petty officer, and a second-class petty officer. You had to spend probably between seaman and third-class petty officer, you had to be in that position for at least a year before you could take the test. Well, each time I took a test, I passed it, so I became a third-class petty officer and a second-class petty officer, and I was going to take the first-class petty officer, but I had to wait over a year or 2 years or something because you had to have so much time in each rank. And so for me to take the first-class petty officer, I would have had to ship over because it takes almost 4 years before you can even take the test. So anyway, while I was in the service, I played sports. I boxed, first of all. Well, as a kid growing up, Richie and Butch and all of us used to box at the recreation, and we used to box almost every week. So we'd go different places. In fact, the Kennedy Center, which is down in Detroit, it's no longer there anymore. We went down there and put on an exhibition of boxing. And I don't even remember who won or who lost. I don't think I ever lost in the ring, though. And I don't think Richie ever lost. And Butch was probably the best of the bunch of us. So we did a lot of boxing in the recreation. So when I went in the service, after boot camp, they wanted some guys to box other guys in the other boot camps that were graduating too. So me and this kid from the South said, well, we had some boxing experience, so we'd go ahead and box for our team, and we both won. I knocked the guy out of the ring, and he wouldn't get back in the ring. So, and the other guy from the South, he won. I don't know what he did, but that was my end of my boxing. Oh no, it wasn't the end of my boxing. Then I went in the service, and to stay out of having to do all this KP stuff, I went out for sports. So I boxed for about I don't know how many fights I had, maybe 5 or 6, maybe 7, I don't know. Fought a Marine one time. I fought other Navy guys. I never lost my boxing, though. I won all of them. And of course, then I went out for football, and when I went in the service, I was only about 130 pounds. When I came out of boot camp, I was 190 pounds. And then, so I went out for football, and we had a couple pros on the team, Lily White and Posen. They were from San Francisco, but I never played. I was just a reserve in football. I was still too small for them. So then I did play baseball and softball in the service. And in high school, I played baseball also for 3 years, and I swam for 4 years. I was a captain of the swimming team, and only one guy beat me. No, 2 guys beat me. A guy named Simons and a guy named Bumpy Jones. Bumpy Jones went on to the Olympics and got himself a gold medal or 2. And Simons, I don't know whatever happened to him. But anyway, all I did was letter. I wasn't all city or all state or anything like that. But that's the sporting I did in the service, both baseball and softball, and swimming. And in the service, I played softball for 4 years on the team, base team. Played baseball, 3 of them. And what else did I do in the service? That's about it. Oh, I boxed. I boxed for a while. In fact, when Rocky Marciano retired, the guy that was on my team was the Olympic gold medalist. And he went into, there were 10 of those guys that got into a round robin to see who was going to replace Marciano for the heavyweight championship of the world. And this guy, what the heck was his name? I know it, but I'm having a hard time remembering it. But anyway, he got knocked out and he died. He never, he was one that was like a fatality. But he was one of the top 10 boxers in the world at the time. And so he, I didn't know much about it other than the fact that I had heard he died. So I never paid much more attention to that. But anyway, after 4 years in the service, I got out and I was going to go to school, but then I had a job waiting for me at Wolverine Tube where my mom worked. So instead of going right to school, I was going to try and go up to Michigan State and play ball, because by that time I was 230 pounds. So I was getting big enough to play. But I worked for 2 years, and then I went up when I was going to go to school. I came up to Michigan State. I looked at the campus. It was so big, I thought, this is crazy. I don't even know if I can pass. So anyway, I looked around and I went over to Eastern Michigan, and that's where I decided I'd go. It was a nice small school. And by that time I was 26 years old, so I figured I was too old to be playing football. I better concentrate on my studies. So my best friend Emil was on the football team, and so he talked me into going out for football 2 years later. When I went out for football, I was playing first string. I was offensive and defensive guard. And in the green and white game at the end of spring practice, they had a regular football game between the squads. And I was a pulling guard, and a fraternity brother of mine was a pulling guard on the other side. And the play, we had to pull, and he pulled the wrong way and came at me, so I tried to take myself out of the play, and he took my knees out, so I had to have both knees replaced. So that was the end of my football career anyway. So I've had a few injuries. Both knees replaced, my right ankle's replaced, and I've got drop foot on my left foot. I've had 4 back surgeries, discs, and I don't even remember half the other things I had. But anyway, that's about the end of my career as far as my dad was concerned. I did meet him again when I was in the Navy. He was in San Diego, or in Alli, and when I went in the Navy, he came down to see me, and he took me out to dinner, me and this friend of mine, and I conned him into giving me his old car, so he had to use his new car when he went to work. But anyway, I had his old junker. It was a 1950 Chevy, but it got me through while I was in the service, and I tried driving it home when I got out of service, and it broke down somewhere in Ohio. So that was the end of that car. When I got back to the States, or when I got out of service, then I went back to Wolverine Tube and worked, because I had that job waiting for me. So that's why I worked for 2 years before I went to service, or went to school. They kept the job open for me. Whenever I had vacations and that, I could go back to Wolverine Tube, because my mom was a very good worker there, and she set a lot of records on the machines she worked on, and I used to do the same thing. And so I always had a job waiting for me if I wanted one. So whenever I had vacations, or in summer vacation, I went back and worked at Wolverine Tube until I graduated from college. Then I became a teacher. Oh, me and my cousins, that was like, you couldn't separate us from anything. We played everything together. You named a sport, we played it. And one got in trouble, the others, we all jumped in. Nobody could pick on any of us without having to pick on all of us. I remember a guy named Roy Smith was picking on...
On you?
Yeah, picking on me, and Richie said, leave him alone, and Richie was smaller than me, and then Richie ended up fighting Roy Smith and beating him. And so Richie's the guy that you never wanted to mess with. He always looked up to me, and he always thought that I was the king, more or less, but I would never have fought Richie, because I think he might have beaten me. And Butch was probably the best known athlete in the family. He was all city in baseball, football, and one other, maybe track, I don't know. Butch was a very good all-around athlete. And, whenever we'd go anywhere and they say, oh, you can get De Palma, do you know a guy named Ralph? And I said, yeah, he's one of our, he's playing right there on third base. And so we all played together, and we went, probably our best accomplishment in sports was in 1962, we were playing slow pitch. And they had a tournament out there in Southgate. They had about 50 teams in it. And the best known team was Eastside Sporting Goods, who were the national champions in softball slow pitch, and they won their championship in New York, and they were in this tournament, and the first team we had to face was them, and they jumped all over us in the early innings, but by the 7th inning we caught them and beat them, and they were undefeated champs. They were something, I don't know how many wins they had, but they were undefeated that year. So anyway, they went through the losers bracket, and who do you think we faced in the finals? Same team again, because they won all their games. And in the finals, we had to come from behind again and beat them. So we beat them twice. So our fame was we beat the world champs twice that year. And they had been undefeated except for those 2 losses. And they were a regular thing in slow pitch. Every year, that same team, there were some guys like a guy named Utley and Puckett and a few other guys that we got to know. They were really good ball players. But they were world champs for I don't know how many years. But our fame was we beat the world champs. That year we were 48-0. And I don't know what their record was. But anyway, that was one of the highlights of our playing together. And that's it. Now, right now, all my cousins are dead except for Bobby and Leo. Well, Leo's dead too. Bobby's the only one left. So Rich, Butch, Louie, Leo, Joe, Astolfi, and they're all gone except for me and Maria's a sister. But Rich's daughter is around, and I know her, but I can't remember her name. It's been so long since I've seen her. And Rich has a son and some more grandkids and that. When my mom was working, and before I worked at Wolverine Tubes, in the summer times, my dad was gone, so nobody was home. So I used to live at my Aunt Marie's house in Oakwood. That was about 3 or 4 miles from our house. So I used to go there almost every weekend. And then finally she said, well, why don't you just sleep here? And instead of going back and forth, especially in the summertime. So in the wintertime, I had to go home because I had to go to my school. But in the summer times, I lived with my Aunt Marie, and my Aunt Connie was there, and Richie and all the guys were there. And it was we were very happy together. We always got along, and if you picked on one of us, you had to pick on all of us. So we were very close.
Who was it you were talking about? Some grandfather?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, Nono was my Uncle Ralph's father. He was they call him Grandpa or something. And he was living at my Aunt Marie's house, and they had bunk beds, and where they had a bottom and top, and there were 4 beds in this room, and I was in one of them. Louie, Richie, and Ralph were in the other three beds. And at night, when the lights were off, we'd be jumping across from bed to bed and wrestling and everything. And Non would come in there with a strap and start beating the hell out of all of us, hitting us with the buckle and that. But we kind of laughed it off because we always got under the covers so it didn't hurt. But yeah, I remember No, he was something else. I don't know when he died. They were still living in Oakwood when he died. And of course, eventually they moved out of Oakwood. Well, speaking of athletes too, Butch was a best known athlete, but Richie was a pro athlete. He was a linebacker for a semi-pro team, Melvindale. He played for Melvindale, and he was an MVP on the team. He was a middle linebacker. He was only probably about 5'6" or something. He couldn't have weighed more than 160 pounds, but he was an MVP of the team that year. And Richie was one hell of an athlete. Although Butch got the recognition, Richie was really the best athlete in the family. When my mom and dad got a divorce, and my mom, she worked for Wolverine Tube, and she bought a restaurant, which was right down there because a lot of the people would come there and eat then. When I was playing sports, this was only one of the years because she didn't have it very long. But I used to, after swim practice, I would then get over to the restaurant, and I'd work in a restaurant until about 11:30 at night. That's when my mom got off the afternoon shift, and then she came into the restaurant to close it up, and I went home to sleep because I had to get up the next morning to go to work, or to go to school. But that went on for about a year and a half maybe. That's one of the years I couldn't play baseball then because I couldn't play afterwards. But I did swim, and I was probably one of the better swimmers in the city. When I turned 18, I was 19 when I graduated from high school because I flunked a few times in the early years. But once I got to high school, I was on the honor roll for 4 years because school was different then. I could see some use in it. I couldn't see it as I was growing up, and so me and Judo Micus, we both flunked. They held us back in junior high. So the next year I just, instead of staying in through the 9th grade, I redid the 8th grade, and I was on the honor roll. So I could pass, I just had to settle down. When I went to high school, Stromer, we called him Little Caesar. He was like an assistant principal, but he wasn't. He was a coach, but whenever they had to have anything done, they always called on him. But anyway, he would come in and he'd see me and he'd say, "How's little Johnny doing?" Because I was still kind of small, and I was only 130-some pounds when I graduated from high school. And when I got out of service, out of boot camp, I was 190, so I put on almost 50 pounds or something. But anyway, we called him Dr. Stromer. Richard Stromer was his name. They called him Little C. He held all the power in the high school. The principal, everybody looked up to him. He was like the fix-it for anything that went wrong. But he always looked out for me too, and he visited Wolverine Tube one time, and he saw me working there when I was a senior, and he came over and he said, "Hey, take care of this guy. He's a pretty good guy." He was telling my boss that, and so my boss came back later and told me about it. And Richard Stromer was a nice guy. I liked him very much, and he liked me. My senior year, I'd get up. First of all, I worked midnights. So I'd go in at 11:30, get out at 7:30 in the morning, take a shower at work, and I'd bring my clothes for school with me, and I'd change, and I'd go to school, and I'd go to school, and then after school, I went to swim practice, and that I was there till about 6:30. I came home and slept till about 10:30. Then I got up and went to work. So that was my senior year. I was pretty worn out. Luckily, I did that after baseball. So I didn't start Wolverine tuba until baseball season was over. And then when swimming season started, I'd swim, but then I'd go to work. So I was pretty worn out by the time the year ended. But it didn't bother me that much because I thought I could do it, and I did it. And I knew my mom needed the help because when she bought the restaurant, she also put her house on the line and took a borrowed on it, and she needed help. So I'd just give her my paycheck every week, and maybe take about $10 what I might need for school and that. And the rest of it she got. Oh, I always had dogs. I'd pick up a dog, a stray dog, and we'd have it. My best friend Pat Purdom and I had Brownie. He was a double-jointed dog. He would lay on the ground, spread his legs apart, and lay right in the dirt. And bury his head in like a little hole. It was cooler that way. But Brownie was a good dog, and my Aunt Fern and my Uncle Mike lived at our house for a while. And when I was in high school, 10th grade or something, they let him out one time, and I came home and I went in the back porch and I saw this rug. I picked it up, and Brownie was under it. He had got hit by a car. So I buried him in the garage. And there was about in that garage. It was a double garage, but it had just dirt floor. So there must be about 2 or 3 dogs buried under there, because we'd find a dog hit by a car and we'd go get them and bring them back and bury them. I think there are only 2 dogs. Brownie, and I don't remember what the other dog's name was. But I always had dogs, and my next door neighbor, they didn't have a basement. They had you get under the porch and it was just dirt. And this one dog I had, Lady, when I brought her home, she had pups, and she crawled under there way out in the front of the house, and she had her pups under there, and I'm the only one that could get near Lady because she was protecting her dog. So my neighbor came and was mad at me, but he said, "You got to get that dog out of there." So I crawled under there. I had to go under there with a flashlight way in front, and it was dirty under there. But there was Lady, and she had about 6 or 8 pups or something, and she's the only one that let me get near them. So I had to get Lady and take all of her pups out, because I guess some kennels or something were going to take care of, I don't know, Humane Society or whoever took the dogs. But anyway, she's the only one that would let me touch her dogs, and I had to carry them all out. They're little puppies. There were about 6 or 8 of them or something. I don't remember. It's been so long. But anyway, they had it in there. The whole neighborhood's out there watching me carrying these little dogs crawling out from under the thing. So that was the end of Lady, and with her dogs, I don't know what happened to her. But and when I found Brownie, by the way, I found this one friend of ours wanted a dog, and we saw by All Saints School and the church, we saw these little dogs running around, and they looked like they didn't have a home. So we got this one and brought it home, and the neighbor wanted a dog, so we gave it to him. And then I thought, hey, his brother was out there. So I went back, and there was Brownie. So I brought Brownie home, and I told my mom, he's a Catholic dog, or a holy dog. And I said, can I keep him? And she said, no. So she said, you can leave him in the garage if you want, but he can't come in the house. So anyway, Brownie would sleep out there, and my room was facing the garage, and I'd hear arr, arr, arr. Brownie was out there scratching. He wanted to get up, so I'd reach down and bring him up and put him in my room. He slept in the house. I got away with that for about a month until my mom found out. I said, well, he's been here for a whole month, so she let me keep him then in the house. But I said, he's a holy dog, so, you know. So that's how I got Brownie. And Brownie used to be such a nice dog, but he used to love to spread his, put his head in a hole and spread out, lay flat with his legs out in the dirt. It was cooler there, and of course there was a tree there too, so you had shade. But Brownie was a good dog. He was one of my favorites. But this is my most favorite right now. I think I love Mikey more than any, and this was Joe's dog. And Joe can't have him back no matter what.
Ouch.
But plus Joe's got to be away anyway a lot, but if he really wanted him, no, I wouldn't give him up. No, I wouldn't give him up. Mikey's my boy. Anyway,
I think
that's about it.